Hey, I'm Dan. I'm part of the team at Open Doors, and this is a short devotion on things we learn from the persecuted church. God is faithful. There's a famous saying, if you fail to plan, then you are planning to fail. In principle, I quite like it. If I'm setting out on a journey, especially to somewhere I've not been before, I like to do a bit of research, check information online. What's the quickest route? What's the most direct route? How can I avoid toll roads? Are there any points of interest on the route? Especially with the kids in the back, if we're going over a long distance, having points of interest can help avoid the "are we nearly there yet" question. But even with the best laid plans, there's no telling what's round the corner. We're not going to schedule in traffic or events that are outside of our control. And in life, we don't schedule in those difficult moments either, do we? I'm not putting in my diary, have a difficult year, have some issues, face some challenges. If we knew that the valley experiences were on the horizon, I've no doubt we'd do our utmost to go in a different direction entirely. Jeremiah 29:11 is a really famous verse. It proclaims this: "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." It's stated to a bunch of exiles who are going to be in Babylon, away from home, for the next 70 years. That is a difficult moment for God's people. It's a difficult word to hear, actually. The promise is not, guys, you're going to have an easy life, or that instantly your circumstance is going to be transformed. But rather it's a message of, guys, I know what's going on. And ultimately, it will work out for your good. Ultimately, there is a hope, there is a future. Jeremiah 29:11 is often quoted at difficult times to do just that, to provide hope. God knows what He is doing. And that might be your experience too. Life is difficult, life is full of challenge, and even when we can't see it or we don't understand why has this happened, God is still faithful. Earlier in 2019, I had the pleasure of meeting a man called Mushtaba. He'd fled from Iran, and his story demonstrates how God is faithful no matter what. Mushtaba came to faith in Iran as a teenager, and quite quickly he went on to lead an underground house church. He, along with anyone who participated in that church, could be arrested if they were discovered. And since he was a leader, his arrest would more than likely mean a conviction, followed by a term in prison. One day, 20 to 30 members of the secret police turned up and raided their gathering. He was arrested, and after serving time in solitary confinement, he was sentenced and thrown into prison. For the majority of his sentence and his time in prison, he was with murderers, with robbers, with drug dealers. He couldn't trust anyone, and he struggled to find hope and purpose, not knowing when or if actually he would ever be released. This is what he said: "I felt a deep fear inside of me. And often, even though the Lord was close, I was sad about my situation. My hands were tied, my voice couldn't be heard." It was those uncertainties of not knowing if he was going to be robbed or killed, or even, hey, am I ever going to be released from this place, that hope just drained. He knew the risks of leading church, that he could go to prison, but it's still not the kind of situation that you plan for. Despite all that, God was faithful. "I prayed, that was all I could do," Mushtaba says. And at first they were prayers just about me, of repentance. I thought God was punishing me somehow. Then the Lord spoke to me, said, "Stop being so selfish, Mushtaba. It's not about you. It's about me. Look around you." You see, God had a plan for his life, and he began to share his testimony and the gospel with other prisoners. Some came to faith. One guy called Muhammad, he was on death row for his crimes. He came to faith before he was executed. His eternal destiny changed. Mushtaba continued to serve God behind bars, but he really wanted a Bible to encourage his own faith and to share with others, but it was proving impossible. Impossible isn't a word that God deals in, though. There was a Muslim imam, and he had an idea. He would bring in printouts of the Bible disguised as English lessons. An imam. They were then translated and spread around the prison. It's amazing. Mushtaba says, going to prison, the isolation, it was worth it. I'd do it again if it meant people put their trust in Jesus. I never prayed for God to release me from prison. I can serve God anywhere, inside or outside the prison. Doesn't matter what situation I'm in, if I can work in God's kingdom wherever He places me. Going to prison, the isolation was worth it. You see, persecution, Mushtaba says, takes the gospel places it otherwise wouldn't go. It reaches beyond prison gates. It reaches beyond distancing and isolation. And God has plans and purposes for us to do His work at such a time as this. And amidst all the uncertainty, and perhaps life taking a turn in a direction that you wouldn't have planned for, we can count on this. God knows, God is with us, and God is faithful. We can, through all of this, continue to point to the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. We keep going. We keep spurring one another on. We keep trusting that God has got it. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for He who promised is faithful.